Thank you very much. I don't know if Anu is on the call. Anu, if you're on the call, please indicate you're on the call just so that people can know that they can reach out to you if there are any questions, right? Anu is supporting me. She's been doing a wonderful job managing a lot of things offline. And thanks to her and our program manager, Molara, who have made sure that we try as much as possible to give you guys what you need to scale through. So, like I said, I want to see in the chat room what these 4 or 5 days that you've been battling with your assignment has done for you. Has it made you say, you know what, maybe I should have not even been in this security? I just wasted my time. I just allowed this woman's sweet voice on the first day deceive me. Or has it stirred up some form of, curiosity to know more? Has it gingered you and has it challenged you and has it spurred you to want to understand more how identity access and management works and how it's important to our whole security ecosystem? I want to know in your own words in the chat box. Thank you very much. So today we'll be taking our identity, training a bit further. Trust me, this is a very, very, very curated course. If we had to spend time understanding just identity, we would use the whole 8 weeks. So where we give you the concept, we try to give you a bit of simulation on the concept, and we move to the next. So in the last two classes, we've understood what identity is, identity provider is, and then we took it a step further to look at how Microsoft in its own environment classifies identity: internal, external, right, member, guest, right? And we now went further to practicalize what an internal kind of user would be. And you will see that in the assignment, we gave you different scenarios of a typical kind of internal member user, and a lot of you were very, very fantastic, in quotes, in your interpretation of that assignment. But that's fine. It was good to see, people put themselves and push their imaginations. um, so today we'll be quickly looking at privilege identity management, which is another type of identity. So if you recall, we talked about the human and the non-human identity last week. And within the human identity, there are certain accounts, and non-human identity also. There are certain accounts that have been given certain rights, right? So when it comes to identity security, you understand, you want to know who should have access, when should they have it, how long should this access last, and what do they do with it, amongst other things, right? So in the digital world, your identity is your access. Your key card, is what you get into a room. You take a key card, maybe your company gives you a key card. That key card takes you to the places you are allowed to go to, right? And some people have access to, vaults. Some people have access to MD's office. They have those privileged access, and those key cards are, highly sensitive. So if somebody else gains access to their key card, then the person can gain access to a sensitive environment. So we're going to be looking at identities and how they are very privileged identities, and how they are very important, and how Microsoft helps us to manage these privileged identities. you know Again, looking at privilege identity, what comes to mind for me is who holds the key, right? Imagine in your house, who holds the key to your house, right? That person, has certain privilege in the house. The person who has the key, not everybody in the house has keys. There are people who come to your house, right? And no matter how close they are to the family, you don't give them a house key. No matter how long they're going to stay, you don't give them a house key, so they don't get that privilege, they don't access that privilege, right? So understand the concept of privilege access as that account or that identity that has access to do much more than a baseline account would have to do. And so we want to understand how to manage it and secure it. So today we'll be looking at what is PIM. PIM is again an acronym for Privilege Identity Management. So now you have another terminology to note down. We're looking at how it's critical for identity security, core features of PIM. We'll look at how to configure and use PIM in some scenarios, and securing privilege access now using Microsoft Entra ID. Don't forget that we have said that Microsoft Entra ID is our focus, right? There are so many identity providers out there, but when we learn the concept of identity, we will now go into how Microsoft interprets that concept. Okay. We'll also, if time permits us, we'll now move into single sign-on. We'll understand how single sign-on interferes, or relates rather, with identity, right? How it works, the benefits of single sign-on. Single sign-on again uses the short form SSO, single sign-on, and we'll understand again different types of implementation protocols of single sign-on. I'm hoping time will permit us to do that. For those who are just joining for the first time or who have never had to meet me, my name is Joy Emedom, and I have over 15 years experience doing tech, but majored in cybersecurity in the last 7 to 8 years of my life, and in the last 3 to 5 years, very specific in Microsoft technology. I have published two books. One is a children cybersecurity book, and one is how to break into cybersecurity, which is free. You can download it from my LinkedIn profile. That gives you an idea of how to use a practical workbook. I belong to the Global Council Responsible AI, where I'm an AI responsible governor, where we sit to look at AI etiquettes and how to secure AI. I'm a wife and a mother, and I have one mantra that I say all the time: the only thing stopping you is you. The only thing stopping you is you. You are the only one that has made yourself not to achieve your dream of becoming a cybersecurity professional, because you have constantly told yourself and believed in something that only you told and created for yourself, that you cannot do it. So, guess what? It's one of the most easiest things to fix. Since you created that concept, since you created that perception, can you uncreate it? Because you did uncreate and begin to tell yourself, I can succeed. I can belong to the cybersecurity professionals. I can excel in this industry. My name can be mentioned in places. I can sit among kings and not mere men. I can make decisions and be known and grow in this career, because you created it, so you can break out of that chain. All right, I want to celebrate two wonderful people today. And trust me, you all have been awesome and wonderful. And this is something that just came to my thoughts early hours of this morning, because these two individuals stayed with me on the call till, if I'm not mistaken, almost close to 2 a.m., helping people. It got to a point I was exhausted. I was just sitting on the call and then supporting them. And these two individuals, because they had gone through the issue, experienced it, troubleshooted, resolve it, they had an idea of what their colleagues, will be experiencing, and they were on the call solving for me. And I believe they're all mothers, because I was hearing children crying in their background, but they stayed up to the call to support me. So I am going to be doing stuff like this every week, where I'll pick people who are the star of the week. I see a couple of you being awesome. I see somebody today posting the meeting, on the chat group, meaning to remind people to come. Those kind of little, you might call them little unnoticed behaviors that you do to show oneness and show that we are ready to work together as a team, already proves to me that you are going to excel. So today I'm going to celebrate Ayodeji, Oluremi, and Nabila Kafi, who stayed with me on the call up to 1 a.m. to resolve people's issues, because I had done it over and over with them and they became familiar and they were willing to put themselves forward. And guess what? Even at some point, they also made one or two errors, because the errors were maybe different from what they're using, but they were practicing and applying what we learned this morning: problem solving skills, doing elimination method. If you remember maths in school, when they gave you elimination method, you have to, and then when you eliminate the ones that are left, is another way that you use to troubleshoot. So thanks to you guys, and you are the star of the week. Let's appreciate them with any emoji of our choice. Let's give them a round of applause, a love heart. I appreciate you. Textiles appreciates you, and God bless you. I look forward to more people stepping up and not being afraid. What you know today, I think it was Russell Brussels that said it. Say that thing that you know, somebody else somewhere doesn't know it. So if you think that you have not learned enough to start to impact to people, that's again another perception that you have created for yourself. You know something that somebody doesn't know. So step up today and start to teach and talk about it, so that you can impact. As usual, let's respect each other. Let's not break boundaries. And if there's anything we feel somehow did not come out well to us, let's feel free to reach out, to any of the coordinators or myself, and we'll see how to, manage this situation. After today, if you have not logged in into your tenant, I am sorry, I will revoke the access. Now, I haven't spoken to our founders if we should consider people who maybe forgot to fill their attendance, but security is actually their first track. They are here on this call, they've been coming, but for some reason, the first 2 days, they forgot to fill their attendance, so they were not profiled. Now there's no tenant for them. So if there are people we have profiled who are not using the tenant, I would have to revoke, because I know that the program coordinator wants to projects to start going out next week, and people need to start doing projects. So please, if you know anybody who registered, who has been coming, and who their name is on the list that I posted, if they don't log in by midnight today, they wake up in the morning and gone. And I will not, and if they drop the message, we'll tell them we're sorry. So on that list that we posted in the chat group, the people yellow are those that have logged in. Every other person that is not color reference yellow has not logged in as at the time I posted it. So maybe if they've logged in now, I will revisit it and look at it. In cybersecurity, identity is not just who you are. It's what you can do. That's why it must be aims and not assumed. You do not assume, right, that Joy needs access to the database server. No, I'm sure some of you have seen EFCC post about some bankers who, that headline for me is so vague, because for those of us who understand how the security of banking, servers database are supposed to be, you can't just say that they were trying to manipulate. That's deep. That means there's an insider risk. It's beyond that. But the point is, if we took the headline as it is, you will see what we're talking about, where people try to manipulate a particular bank. The name of the bank was kept off, database, and they were apprehended. So it's not safe to say that, oh, Joy needs access. Joy is a born again Christian. She's a child of God. She loves Jesus. We can see it on how she speaks Santa Boria. And so based on that, I know her in my church. She's very dedicated. And so based on that, I'm going to give her admin access because I trust her. No, it doesn't work like that. Right? It needs to be, why do you need it? What do you need it? And like we say, you must have earned it, and we don't assume that you need that access. So what's a privilege identity? Sometimes we call this sensitive identity, sometimes we call it account. It's an identity that has elevated permissions. Like I gave you the example in your house, right? There are certain people that can come into mommy and daddy's room, and there are certain people that cannot come, no matter how close of a family that they are, right? They don't have that privilege. There are certain people that will be in your house for as long as they can be, but you still don't give them the privilege of giving them a house key. So meaning that they can never enter the house unless somebody is in the house, no matter how close they are. There are certain people like that. I lived in a home where my dad was a typical Igbo trader, and so most times the minimum we were at home is about 15 to 17, because Igbo boys and shops. And so there were certain people who they couldn't go certain places, right? There were certain of the boys who, no matter how much they worked in the shop, they were not responsible for closing the books or touching money, till they had graduated to certain place. So that kind, if you understand privilege and concepts like that to human identity for businesses, look at it like that in the tech world. There are certain people who will not have privilege to be able to install, they will not have privilege to be able to delete, they will not have privilege to be able to assign or modify permissions, they will not have privilege to be able to configure policies, they will not have certain privilege to be able to access, sensitive or critical data, right? And so this type of users, right, will now be called non-privileged identity. So typically they can access their email, they can read their emails, log into Teams, but elevated activities they will not be able to do. So can somebody tell me, or do you agree with me, that every one of you, in order for you to deliver on your assignment, you a privileged user or were you a non-privileged user? Let me see your answer. Again, I'll repeat the question. Based on this description that I've given, the privilege that you use, the account that you use to do your assignment, based on what I've explained now, what was that account? Do you think that account you used was a privileged user account or a non-privileged user? Let me see your reactions in the chat group. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. So yes, you had privilege because and why? Simple. You could create users, you could delete, you could modify attributes, you could make certain changes on users' accounts, right? A typical user cannot do that, right? Another way to understand privilege and non-privilege is and permit me, no shades, but this is typical in most African homes. The firstborn or the lastborn, those people are like goats. You know how a couple, young, striving, whatever, looking for children, and then they have this child. To them, they just give birth to diamond, their firstborn child. The kind of party. I come from the eastern part of Nigeria, and when you give birth to your firstborn child, the first thing you hear is, oh, whoa, whoa. There'll be a scream of that sound by the senior wife in your husband's compound, who will scream, oh, whoa, whoa. And the sound of oh, whoa, whoa will communicate to every other woman that a child has been born. When it now happens to even be a boy, that shout will be so loud. And when you come out, you see people putting powders, right? So, but it's not like as if they will not shout, oh, whoa, whoa, when other people are born. But the one born for that first child is always, very special. Exactly. I like that. I like that example. Even first daughters, right? So understand privileges like that, where sometimes it's even a subtle thing. It's not necessarily that you are differentiating your children, but you just find this undue pressure or expectation from your firstborn children. And then the lastborn children, their privilege is that they're just spoiled and entitled and think that because they're lastborn, everybody will happen to them. We just had a baby of 1 year who is 1 year, 8 months, and she's the lastborn. And my husband falls for everything at this age. Like, I'm wondering by the time she grows, she does, he stands up. She does, he stands up. I'm like, can this girl just even do anything and you will not panic or react, right? So she's already harnessing the power and privileges of being the last born, of the house after even 8 years. So you can imagine. So now that we have an understanding about privilege, would you agree with me that it's important, right? Or do you think it's important that we put extra layer of protection on these identities that we have classified as privilege? Let me see your reaction, right? Now, let's use a real world scenario to further buttress why we think, privilege identities need to have a separate or an elevated protection. I think it was in 2002, the Uber hack, if I'm not mistaken. The Uber hack was around, where I think on Twitter, somebody came and tweeted, that he just hacked Uber and he's been able to, gain access to a PowerShell script that had administrator embedded, password embedded in it, and it was not encrypted. And that password gave him access to the privilege access manager where he elevated his rights and he was able to get access to Uber services and all of that. And when you see those kind of compromise, right, it mainly clearly states, the importance of protecting privileged identities. So the account that needed to, have access to the server to get all those things needed to understand when we begin to look at just-in-time access. Why, as a privileged account, yes, we don't give you your privileged access to stay with you all the through. We give it to you when you want to need it. That's where you hear just in time, right? And also why privilege certain privilege accounts when they are non-human accounts. So the account that was embedded in the PowerShell script that was a privileged identity, how it could have been kept in the Azure key vault and only requested for when needed, rather than just saved in clear text unencrypted in the PowerShell script. Yeah. So this is a typical example of when privileged identities are not properly managed, how they can lead to a cyber breach or a potential cyber breach. Is this making sense? And so, piggybacking on that, Uber experience, right, we can see that a hacker doesn't necessarily need to break in if they can log in. Once trust me, when hackers are doing social engineering on you, the first thing they want to do is see if they can log in. So lots of you have your ISP devices in your home that you have set up and you have never logged into the admin portal to change the default password. And you're forgetting that when these ISP providers set this thing, they use the same default password across everywhere. A lot of you have your cameras set up in your home by your camera guys, and when they were done and gave you access to where you can view your home or view your office or view anywhere from anywhere on your device, that login details that they gave you, they know it, they left away with it, they didn't teach you how to change it, so they too can sit in their house and they can watch your house and they can have access to where your data is being stored and they can do all sorts, right? And you haven't thought about that end-to-end management of that privilege account. So hackers don't necessarily, if they try, their first attempt is always see if you have not done the proper identity hygiene, and they leverage on those gaps to be able to go in before they even start thinking of hacking. So let's do a quick knowledge check. I've been talking for about 20 something minutes. Just ask a couple of questions. I need your answers in the chat to see how we are going. Now, my first question is, Jacob has the ability to add new enterprise applications to the Microsoft tenant, and he wants to also even configure single sign-on for those apps. Is Jacob a privilege or non-privilege identity? Let's go. Let's go. Fastest fingers. I'm expecting us to type. Yeah, yeah. If it's too hard for you, write P and not NP. When you write P, I know it's privilege. When you write NP, yes, I'm seeing a Gen Z already on the call. They're the ones that know how to abbreviate everything. GWRM, IDK, everything they will abbreviate. So I can see them already in the chat. So P and NP would also be a way to identify your answer. All right. Second question. All login all logins in daily to check in mails. So when people log in to check in their mails, schedule Teams meeting, and update project documents, for example, in SharePoint. Sorry, Ali. Um, this, but they cannot access the admin portals. They can only just log into their emails, log into SharePoint, see what they're doing. Um, do they have privilege? Another example would be those of you who tried, to upload your assignments. Remember, you couldn't upload your assignments until after a while. I now allowed you upload your assignments. So with that, that's a similar thing here. You can log in, you can check your meetings, you can check that, but you can't do certain things. Is that a privilege or non-privilege account? All right, we're going. Chow John, I don't know if you're answering question 1 or 2. If it's question 2, you are not correct. This question 2 is a non-privileged account. He doesn't have the ability to make any change, so it's a non-privileged account. Question 3, Sarah has updated password policies, enforced MFA, and assigned users to security groups in Entra. Is Sarah a privileged or non-privileged user? Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, guys. It means that in the last 20 minutes I've been speaking, I've been making sense and not talking to myself. Awesome. I feel so energized and ginger to push this. And with 2 more before we continue. Jacob has the ability. Okay, we've done this. I think it was a repetition. Sorry. And then we'll do the last one. An account is used only for break glass emergencies and has global administrator permission, but it's not used day to day. Is this a privilege or non-privilege? The last question. Privilege or non-privilege? Awesome, right? There were lots of cues even in the questions, right? When somebody says global permissions, when somebody says, oh, you cannot make changes, these are cues. And like those who are enjoying the class, where the president LA was teaching us, they are called outliers that we can use to be able to do our elimination method and fix it. So thank you very much. So now, awesome, we have an understanding about what privilege identity is. So now let's go and look and understand how Microsoft Entra ID, which is the identity provider that we've been studying in the last 3 days, 2 weeks rather, manages privilege identity. Now, if you look up there, I've been able to capture a couple of other privilege identities. So we have CyberArk, we have One Identity, we have Beyond, we have others too that manage, identities and manage privilege identities, right? So it's not only Microsoft. However, right, we want to study how Microsoft Entra manages privilege identity. Now, so we move it a step further. We've understood what a privilege identity is. Now we want to understand what is a privilege identity management system. Remember, we had studied 2 weeks ago what an identity provider is, but now inside the identity provider, we want to understand the privilege identity management system. And this is just a solution that would help an organization to control, monitor, and secure privilege identity. So when it's not a privilege identity, we leave it, in the big pool. We only focus on the if it's a non-privileged identity, we don't worry about it, or we leave it to adhere to these baseline policies, but we use a PIM, to focus on privileged identities. Now, the traditional way this would happen before you have PIN. So the traditional way, there will be a privilege identity, whether you like it or not, in the traditional system. But what that would mean is that the privilege identity would always be privileged all the time, right? The privilege access will never be taken away at some point in time. It will always have that access. And so what that means is that there's a higher risk of misuse, because it means that everything that I run on my system, every script, so all of you again are privileged users on your personal laptops, because it's your personal laptop. You configured it yourself. You did not have to take away permissions, right? And for some of you who share your personal laptop with your children, you have created maybe another account for your children, and you will see that some of you did not make that account an admin account. So your children probably can't install things on that laptop. They will always come to you, and check, right? So a privilege account, right, has their privilege always on. And sitting on top of that, that means that there's a high potential, for them to misuse that access, because even when they don't need to run an elevated script, they'll be finding themselves running it because that's their default access, right? And in the traditional way, we did not have a central system that can help us see what is happening, help us track, help us monitor. So no activity or oversight over that privilege identity. And then it had static role and assignment. So we've already said it's always on. And the reason why it's always on is that whatever permission or role that you have given it, it forever remains with that permission and role, because there's no system to manage it, right? Except you manually set up like a calendar to say, oh, go and remove this access. That account will stay. However, on the other side, a privileged identity management system will allow us to do just in time access. So what does that mean? I need an access to be able to create user. Then I will request for a privileged access, right? And I will create user. And when I am done creating user, after a particular duration that has been set on the system, that access will go away. So while I am a privileged user in the organization, while people know that, oh, Joy is responsible for creating users and deleting users in the organization, I do not have that access with me all the time. I only collect that access when I need to do a task that leverages or requires to leverage on that privileged access. That's one of the things that PIM does for you. Another thing is that you get that temporary approval, right? So another thing that PIM does for us is that, you know it gives you a temporary access, temporary approved access. So we can configure it to say, okay, these users who are responsible for creating users, that creation of user is not something that happens all the time in the organization. Probably HR will have bulk user. HR does not recruit 24/7 in an organization. So we could say this access, are only given between this period to this period, and it's taken away. So temporary access, approved access can be given, or you have a vendor. So for example, in that your assignment where you had the marketing person who came as a temporary staff, right? That person, if they had to do a privileged function in the organization, will be given a temporary approved access, because therefore temporary stay, and that access will be configured based on that status or attribute that they have. Privilege identity management also helps us to do auditing. Remember, we have said that in the traditional way, we didn't have that visibility and insights into accounts. So privilege identity management will allow us to do auditing. We can get alerts and reports. And the role-based access that you need is always on demand and activation. So I need a user access role. When I need it, I will go and request for it on the system. It will go to probably an approval workflow, and then it will be approved, and I'll have access. So you see that we will be able to apply the Microsoft Zero Trust methodology principle. The Microsoft Zero Trust methodology principle says that use least privilege access all the time, right? And this is what helps us to secure our data and prevent things like the Uber hack, right? So you can Google the Microsoft Zero Trust Guidance Center and you read up on all of that. But that's what a privilege identity management brings for us. It allows us to put that control and visibility in the home. If there are any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat. Like I said, we're going into Microsoft's own Entra identity PIN, and then let's see how to manage it. So Microsoft Entra identity has been infused now into what Microsoft calls the identity governance, right? Because its expectation is that you're trying to govern this identity, creating the identity, giving the identity license, all of those things. But then you want to manage and govern how this account behaves in your organization, how long it stays, what it's doing. And so they had to now put this under the identity and governance settings. That's where you typically find this. So where I told you that when you set up your tenant, Microsoft will give you a global admin account. So it's inside the PIM that you define, do you leave the global admin account forever, or do you use it only when you need it, or do you leave it for certain accounts? All right. So what's a privilege identity management system? This is a service in Microsoft. So for the Microsoft one, this is a service in Microsoft that allows you to manage, control, and monitor access, right? And when we talk of access, we're talking about around resources like the Microsoft Entra ID, which you have tested and seen. You have been given a privileged access, and you can see that you were able to manage, you were able to control, you were able to, monitor access that you created, control the access that you created on Entra ID, and also on Azure. So the cloud hosting platform, so your colleagues that are in cloud computing class, right, studying Azure, right, privilege identity, they will be dealing with certain privilege identities, and the PIM also manages the Azure resources. And then you have people around the Microsoft Online. The Microsoft has the Microsoft 365 suite that gives us Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive. So in a typical organization, you have people who are the admins of these different components, right? It might not be the same person, it might be the same person. In my life, once upon a time, 7 years ago, I was the same person managing all these platforms, right? So they used to call me a high risk. I was a not only a privileged user, I was a high risk user. It took, those are times where you know that you have integrity, because you are holding things that you could sell, or you could crumble, an organization down, because you had access. For me, it was a responsibility that used to give me headache, because I just knew that I couldn't find myself in a compromising situation, because I used to tell them that I don't have money to bail myself, neither does my husband have money to bail me in the event where somebody go and do fraud. So I was very finicky and paranoid about my assets, because I was a very sensitive user, highly privileged, because I was managing so many infrastructures together, which is where audit and control always comes in and fights with us, because those kind of scenarios shouldn't ideally be where one person is over privileged just in case of an incident. So the different components of Microsoft would have different types of admins, right? And so these different types of admins, right, are privilege identity. The PIM will be used to manage them. And one of the benefit of this is that we want to preserve malicious attacks, like we saw with the Uber scenario. And another reason why we do PIM is not necessarily preventing even malicious attack. A legit user can genuinely just make a mistake. Like I said, many of you, in creating your accounts, in doing your assignments, were making mistakes. Imagine this was a production tenant you were making those kind of mistakes on. Some of you tried and retried, delete, but you were able to do it because it's a test tenant. So imagine if this was a production and you were given a privilege account, and you had packaged yourself in your interview, and you had wowed the hiring manager, and they had given you a job. And on your first day, I don't know how many people have seen that, meme that says that an intern on his first day brought down, the bank server, even though we know that in reality, nobody will give an intern access to a bank server. But what it means is that you have boboed, and they said, you know what, take this access and do this. And you just do dash, raise, erase, or delete, or whatever, So sometimes genuinely, right? You could have those incidents. So the PIM is not necessarily for even only malicious. It is to also help and safeguard you, right? You, the admin person, you want to use PIM because you want to know that when I am done with this my access, right? I leave it. So, like I said, the time I was overprivileged, imagine PIM was not a big deal. Imagine if there was PIM, right? It would give me some level of comfort, because I will know that when I was going home, that privilege was taken out of me. When I come the next day, I will go into the portal and I will request it, and it will be given to me, yes, because my daily job requires it. But I could sleep well at night. Do you know how it felt if they call and say, oh, something is happening, we're seeing something funny on the network, and you're just panicking and saying, hope my account has not been compromised, hope this has not been compromised, just because you had a overprivileged account that was using the traditional method of constant access, permanent access, and no just-in-time access, and where you need access. So these are, it's just a nutshell, a summary of what the PIM is, to Microsoft, and what that means to you. This is a bit too small too for me. I didn't pay attention to here, but I'll just run to here. So this is just talking about what the privilege identity management does for you, right? Like I said, just in time access, you would say there are certain roles that should only collect it when they need it. It should not be permanent, right? If there are certain roles that even if they need it, it should be within a particular time frame, right? And it will go further to say there are certain roles that you need approval. So I'm currently working on a project where there are some new interns that were brought in, and after training them for like 2 months, I said to the client that I think that for them to effectively understand this solution, they need access. But because I know that they are new in this field, what we can do is we will build the role an approval workflow on the role. And what will happen is that they will only request for, when they need to do this work, they will request for, access, so that somebody in the team who is senior will know. And when we now look through what they want to do, we feel comfortable and we approve it, but just so that they can begin to get hands-on and practice what they are reading, and the organization was fine about it. And that's how we went. So you have the ability to put approval workflows on certain roles, right? You can enforce MFA too. You can say, for this role, I don't care. Yes, the person is supposed to have it, but for every time the person wants to do a tax with this role, it should prompt MFA, right? So you will see some of you, the moment you, not some of you, everybody, when you were setting up your account, remember we've already said that all of us are privileged accounts and had privileged accounts. And when you were setting up, you saw that it forced you to put MFA. So those are some of the things you can do with PIM, where you can force to use MFA. In some instances, we can also force you to put justification. We can also link it to your service ticket. So for example, if you are providing support, so tickets have been logged, imagine an Intune administrator or a service desk administrator who has the ability to change password, right? And people are logging tickets, right? For every time she goes to elevate her credential, he or she can put in the ticket number, in that workflow, that shows that, see, this access was because I want to do this job. So I'm not just requesting access because I like, where I'm going to. I need access for this ticket. So people can always reference the ticket, that you were using access to. And you can also download history, download policy. Another thing that you can do with PIM is that you can put access review. So when you have set this up, you can put access review for the guys in governance who need to come periodically to see and make sure that admin accounts are within the compliance and regulators, requirements. And so we can configure access review on this PIM configuration, so that it doesn't even wait for them to come. When maybe 30 days to that time or 14 days to that time, it will send a notification. Hello, Nabila, you are responsible for reviewing these privilege identity groups, and then Nabila can log in, review, and say, who is this person? When did this person get approval to be here? And then she can go to service desk and see, service desk, can I see a request that this person asked before this person was added into the PIM group? And they can review us. They will say, oh, this was a vendor. We were doing this project and this vendor asked for this access and we gave them. How come we've not revoked this access, right? So you can also do access reviews and on privilege identity. Any questions so far? Now moving a bit, I would try to just be fast, small. All right. So for us to look at, the way Microsoft manages the privilege identity, there's a structure. Again, this is me. Some of these things are the way that I envisage it because of having worked in it. So you have an administrator. A privilege account is an administrator, right? And now the way Microsoft has it is that Microsoft has what it calls the Azure rules. Remember, I told you that you have the cloud computing side. The guys who are in cloud computing now, they're the ones responsible for setting virtual machine, setting virtual networks, integrating VPN connections, all of those settings, blocking IP, and those guys will fall under Azure role. And in Azure role, we'll see things like owner, contributor, and a couple of others, right, that are under that role. And then Microsoft has another category called Entra roles, right? This Entra roles, right, it calls them role, it has the role-based access control, which is, if you go to the admin.microsoft.com, remember the admin.microsoft.com is responsible for managing the M365 services, while the Entra ID is responsible for managing every cloud identity. That's the two difference between the platform. The M365 admin portal focuses on just only the M365 services. So what are the services? Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Power Apps, just focuses on those ones. While the Entra ID focuses on everything around. So cloud computing, which is Azure, Kubernetes, everything inside the containerization, it focuses on that. So for the Entra, it uses role-based access control, which you typically will see in the admin Microsoft.com. However, it uses another type of roles. It still puts them under the role-based access control, but it now puts a badge on them called privilege roles. And so I decided to coin what I call the PBAC, which is privilege based access control. When I share my screen, you're going to see um, you're going to see see that. Hello, 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 hello. I hope I'm very audible. Yeah. Thank you very much. All right. So keep this snapshot somewhere at the back of your mind as we progress. We will not dwell too much on the Azure roles. Reason being that on the tenants you're using, we don't have virtual machines and all that, because you need to have a subscription. If you remember again in the second class, remember that pyramid I drew for us in second class where there was tenants and then there was subscription and then there was services, right? So we will focus on services because we have services. We have M365 services that we're using, but we don't have tenants, to do the whole Azure back and forth. So we would not be able to simulate the Azure roles, but I'll just give a high level explanation. But for the Entra roles, which will split into what I call the privilege based access role and the role based access role, we access control, we would be looking at it as we progress. So let's quickly look at the Azure roles, like I said. So in the Azure roles, you ask yourself who needs access and what role needs to be assigned. The Azure has inbuilt Azure roles, which are owner, contributor, reader, user access, and then other task specific roles. So owner is the oga patapata of them all, right? The same way you have the global admin, the owner in an Azure resource is the oga patapata of them all. A contributor is somebody that, yes, he has, so it's like saying the second in command they have, but then daddy is the head of the home, mommy is also the head of the home, but supporting daddy is not. So mommy can stand in the capacity of the head of home if daddy is not around, but once daddy is there, daddy assumes that role as owner and mommy contributes like that. Reader is that firstborn son or uncle or auntie who is there to stand, but there are certain things that they cannot do. So it breaks it down like this. So when we want to assign this privilege to identities, we will ask things like, what are you managing? What subscription? What resource group? So it breaks it down to, first of all, the management group. It breaks it down to, first of all, the management group. And then it now breaks it down to what subscription is this managed. So because you can have multiple subscriptions on your tenant in Microsoft. So it will come and say, Joy is asking for access. Which resource is she asking for? This resource is inside what resource group? And this resource group is under what subscription? And this subscription is under what management group? Do you get what I'm saying? Um, Now, so you would also give access to this using the identity access control access side in the Azure to grant access to it. I'll swift over this as well. And again, your wonderful PowerShell that many of you don't like, you can also manage the roles using PowerShell. I don't know why, I just have a feeling that some people just said, blood of Jesus, not PowerShell again. Don't worry, I'm not giving you PowerShell again here to because we will not be simulating Azure roles. All right, you can also custom these rules. What do we mean by custom? Remember, we said that they are built-in rules, but you can also customize your own and have how you want it to. So you can say the job function in our organization, even though Joy is a DevOps, right? Maybe Joy should be able to maybe push to production. So she's a DevSecOps, but then she should be able to still push into release environment. And so you want to customize, take a permission from here, put it together and create something that is custom. So it allows you to look through the permissions that exist in the built-in and then create your own custom rules. Um, okay, again, you can add the Azure rule directly on a subscription, which gives it a much broader scope. Um, Now, moving from Azure roles, remember the pyramid, sorry, the chart that I showed, we had Azure roles. Now we have Entra roles. So moving into the Entra roles, right? The Entra roles will typically be for, like we mentioned, IT admins, app developers, M365 Office, everything under M365, email, exchange, so that which is Exchange, Intune, endpoint protection, identity, which is user access control, and the rest of them, right? All of this will fall under the Entra roles, right? And they do not overlap with the Azure rules, right? The Azure rules are clear for those cloud computing resources, and the Entra rules are there. I think we have approximately about 28, if I'm not mistaken. Now, remember when I told you that within these Entra rules, all of them are privileged, but Microsoft has done something. Microsoft has looked through his list of 100 and think about 120 roles and said some of these roles, they are privileged, but they are not, they are, sorry, they're administrator roles. It means that this person is an administrator. This person can administer something, but they don't have this high privilege. I'll give you an example. An example would be security reader. A security reader cannot make any change, but a security reader is privileged. So when we come to cybersecurity, remember, in cybersecurity, we're saying confidentiality, integrity. So a security reader can see. So that person, so we haven't, so that information is no more confidential. So a security reader is classified as a privileged user because they can see, but they cannot make any change. All right. So I was explaining how, just so that we understand, Microsoft's own twist to it. 100 and something roles has been classified as administrator roles, but there are some of these roles that can make changes and there are some that cannot make changes. So I was giving you an explanation that in cybersecurity, the CIA trust says confidentiality, and in confidentiality, what we mean is that you know what confidentiality is. You know what no this information should be kept close. Now, if I can see an information, right? Yes, I cannot change it, but I can see it. It's not confidential to me, right? It means that I know about that thing. I might not change it, but I know about it. So, meaning that if, for example, a hacker compromises my account, yes, I don't have access to change, but the hacker can, because I have ability to see, spend time doing social engineering on our environment, know the users who have the privileged accounts, and know how to handle them, because a reader can read, see logins, see the time people logged in, see the devices that they logged in from, see where they logged in from. Are you seeing it? But a reader cannot make any change. So you're going to see those kind of roles. Now, Microsoft has been, very smart to now classify it. So you will see when we go to roles and administrator, those roles that can make changes, Microsoft put a badge there called privilege. So you see this badge on them here. I'm highlighting it. This badge, you see it privilege. It will put it there. And then the ones that don't have privilege is saying these guys can do stuffs, but they are not privileged user. They are not going to, you know, make that kind of impact to the environment. But these ones, be very careful. This one's classified as privilege. Be very careful of what they can do because they are sensitive and all of that. Now, it's very important you understand this because when we begin to design a privilege identity model, you want to have this in mind. Um, so, like, give an example that what would be a typical example of a privilege account that will have a badge and a privilege account that will not have a badge. Security reader. Security reader would see, all the security configurations. Security reader will see permissions but cannot change. A security administrator would see and can make changes. That's a typical example that you will have there. All right. Um, we can also make changes to Microsoft Entra using three platforms. You can use the Entra Admin Center, right? So the admin.microsoft.com, you can use the Microsoft Graph, which we've been calling with the PowerShell, and then you can use the PowerShell, or you can use what Microsoft introduced newly. I saw that one recently. Um, yes, the recording is on. Yes, recording is on. Thank you. You can see a red light at the top left when you're looking. That shows and indicates that recording is on. Um, um, and then you can use all of this to manage, privilege roles and privilege assignments. Again, preference, right? People and preference. I know some of you did not like PowerShell because of the experience it gave you, but trust me, it's because it's your first time. By the time you get familiar, you might just find yourself liking to use PowerShell. You can also do a bit of delegation also with these Entra roles. You can restrict and manage even from an application perspective, right? You will see instances where you advance in your career, you will not experience it in this training because, like we said, we try to just pack things. There'll be certain times where they will be designing an application to talk to an application. So remember when we talked about non-human identities, where applications are configured to talk to applications. So the guys who are in the Copilot agentic class, in the Power Apps class, what they do is they work with apps that need to talk to another app, so not necessarily a human account talking to the backend server. And what you typically do is that you also want to give that thing certain roles, because it's based on the privilege that it has, that can allow it to go and read people's attributes and read people's, read people's attributes and respond back. So again, Microsoft Entra allows you assign the roles to those kind of, identities. We also have things that we call administrative tasks, where you can put people together based on what they need to do, right? And when you create these administrative tasks, maybe people in marketing, people in service desk, you can now give them these roles based on the task. So we can say that the guys in team E are all in the same department and they all do the same thing, right? Or two people in team E and two people in A do the same job function. We've seen organizations, but they're in different teams. Another place that you see that kind of example is in the banking industry. You will have somebody in IT who sits in the core banking team and is responsible for reconciliation, and you have somebody in the e-banking team who sits there and is responsible for reconciliation. So the guy who sits in the e-banking responsible for reconciliation is supporting the business, because the business is the one who goes out, brings this opportunity. And so they have to maybe make sure that people's transactions. So when you do an ATM transaction and your transaction fails, right, and you go to the bank to log a dispense error, right, what you're actually doing is that form, the customer service person is lodging that your complaint to their own system that goes to somebody at the back end reconciliation to validate and say this person makes a claim that she tried to withdraw 10,000 naira and 10,000 naira did not withdraw, but it debited her account, right? So the person in the e-banking system will go into the system based on their access to validate that, because at the end of every transaction, that person in e-bank is supposed to do the plus and minus, debit and credit. I don't know if we have accountants here. Permit me if I'm not expressing it very well. I'll express it in the most layman way. At the end of every transaction, we call it end of day. They need to balance their book. They need to say, we received 100 million and we gave out 20 million and our books are balanced, right? Now, the guy in e-banking, remember when they are doing that, you got a debit. Now, if you were debited, but you were not your money didn't come out from you, but your account has gone debit, it means that in the database of the bank, right, your account is less. The banks, if the bank started the day with 100 million and you are saying that you've been debited 10 million, the bank's database is short 10 million, right? But from a cash flow perspective, right, that 10,000 didn't come out. So if they now counted cash, there will be extra of 10 million, in simple layman terms. Now, how does the bank close this transaction at the end of the day? Somebody is sitting in e-banking, right, for reconciliation, and that person will look into the system and see that we have cash excess of 10,000, and they will just log it down. They don't know where it is. They don't know who, because everybody got debited properly, but somebody, so they don't know who it is. But they will log on so day we had a overflow of 10,000, right? We did not credit this person, and then they were able to trace it and say, okay, this is the user we didn't credit, but we're going to wait for them to come back and complain. Sometimes they reverse it. That's why you see reversals, right? So they'll tell you, don't worry, to be reversed after 5 days, because during that reconciliation, they're supposed to see that, oh, we did not credit Joy, right? So let's reverse it. Now, if for some reason, system failure, blah blah blah, they don't reverse it, you have waited for them 2 3 days, you go and log a complaint. Now, for the e-banking to balance that, they need to go to the core banking team who manage the server and the banking application to say, we have this transaction, we're seeing it, but we're seeing that, this person was not credited, but we're not seeing where the funds are and all of that. They all see that. So everybody is talking into the core banking system, but at different level and different permission, because the guy in e-banking probably is only focused on reconciliation, but the guy in IT is focused on the server, the application. So those two people, you can put them inside an administrative tax bucket in Entra called core banking admins for reconciliation, right? And give them a custom rule. I'm just trying to, it's not, you won't find this kind of design in a typical bank, but there are places where this person has a privileged person, this person has a role that is the same with this. We want to be able to lock it down and not just say, oh, give everybody full security admin, because what they are doing, security admin can do it. No, we want to say, you need security admin, but this particular action in security admin, which is maybe edit this line, and so we just want to take all of you, put in this bucket and give edit line, not give you the full security admin. So we have scenarios where organizations are very granular and thorough, and they will want you to design their environment like that, give those kind of specific, roles, and use administrative units to achieve that. I hope that made some sense. And that falls into, you can't do that without now doing custom role. Again, you can customize a role. You take a role, you edit it. Now when we go into practical, you see that you can't duplicate a role. You have to open it up, look at the permissions, refer to a Microsoft documentation to help you for that, look at what the permissions are, add the ones you need, and then name it what the custom role is. Unfortunately for now, Microsoft does not allow you duplicate, like click on the role and say duplicate. No, but you can open it and duplicate it and still call it a custom. But you can duplicate a custom role. Very funny. You can't duplicate a built-in role. You only open a built-in role, copy what is there into another, call that one custom. Then that's your custom. You can now duplicate. Don't ask me why it's like that. I don't know. All right, so this just speaks to how we can create, custom roles. You go to the Entra. So when we go into the practical, you see how we can edit custom roles. We can also assign roles. So we can assign roles to user. So get a group of users like you. Oh, Dorcas is a new member in the developers team, right? And she's supposed to use the Python language and blah blah blah, and she wants access to be able to deploy applications in the test area, staging area, move to release area, and production area. So we've identified that she needs application role, she needs application developer role, and we just go in and assign that role to her directly. It's like that. Some people have that. Is it the best practice? No, but some organizations are doing that and it's doable. You can just assign to one person, that's it. We can come and say that the team of developers exist, and so because we know that they will keep employing and people will be resigning, we don't want to be adding it one by, we just want that when they employ you, right, you just feed straight into IT. So you will see that when we're looking at SSO, I'm sorry, into HR, and when HR requests for your account to be created, automatically all the groups that is binded to that department, once you are added into that group, you will inherit the role. So that's what we can do. So we can create a group, put everybody unique who are unique into that group, and add the role. So the moment anybody enters that group, that person automatically inherits all the roles that have been assigned to that group. That's another way to do it. Now, how do you set up your privilege identity? You would go to your home on the Entra. So when you log into Entra, you go to home, then you go to identity governance. On the search, you search for identity governance. When you search it the first time, then it will pin it on your dashboard. And when you go to identity, you now go to enterprise role by the left, and then you see the privilege identity management, which has already been set up for you on your tenants, right? At the first of all, the entry level. And so from here, you can now choose which roles you want to activate for the organization. So at this level, what you're doing is activating for the organization, and then is there any setting for that role? So some roles will have that it should be on for 8 hours, and after every 8 hours log you out and log you back in. So it'll be 2 hours. This is where you go and edit it and go to role settings and say, okay, no, this role we want it for this hours, this role we want it for X hours, based on what has been approved in your security policy or user access policy. Please feel free to drop your questions. Now, after you have set up the PIM at the identity governance, when you come to now use the privilege identity management as a user, whenever you log into Entra, what you need to do is at the search bar, you will search for privilege identity manager and it will load like this. And if you want to now activate your role, you will come to activate just in time. Click on it and you will see the roles that you've been given that you are eligible. So we're going to move into where you will see what is eligible, what is active, what is permanent, what does that mean in privilege identity. So you will see if you're eligible. Eligible means has this role been assigned to you? And then active is you are actively using the role, you have enabled that role is active. And when you see permanent, it means that so you can be eligible permanent, meaning that you're eligible for this role, but they have kept it permanently for you. Or you can be eligible and not permanent, meaning that it has a duration. So whenever you activate it, it's only just going to be there for XYZ, and after that period, it will time out. So you can be activated on a time base, and you can be activated, and it means that you are permanent, meaning that even if you finish doing your tax, right, you would still have that access, meaning that if your account was compromised, that access is there, versus just in time, which it works within a time frame. Um, it's a bit here and here, but it's one of the most interesting um, identity security thing that you would do in your lifetime that is so, it looks so easy when you want to implement it, but when you are designing it, it can be a bit complex because different people in different departments with different functions, and so you will need to sit down. So this is where I would, again, when I give assignments, to sit down and understand what we're saying before you rush to implement. The implementation is one of the most easiest, but the design to understand what you want to implement is where the beans is, because you need to know this department are overlapping, what is common, or they are not overlapping, and all of that. So we look at some terminologies. We have eligible. What does this mean? Um, this is a role that will require you to perform one or more actions to use the role. So eligible means that you're eligible to that role, so you have it, but you only activate it based on if it was configured for permanent or if it was configured for activation. Now, active means that you have activated that role. That role is active in your profile right now, so that's why it's active. Activate means that you're going to activate a role. So a role exists. When you see activate beside it, it means that that role is not yet active, but when you activate it, then it becomes active. When you see assigned means that you are eligible, but it's through an assignment. It was assigned to you, the user, right? So you can assign to a group or you can assign to a user. So permanent eligible, like I explained, is there's no duration. You are permanently eligible to that role. It's not going to go off, or maybe until you leave that organization or until you leave that group. Permanent active, right? You always be active. There's no time frame on it, right? So you're always eligible for this role. You're always going to be a user administrator because that's your job. You will always be a user administrator, but you can use it only for 2 hours every time it activates. Or you are permanently going to be a user admin because that's your job, and you permanently would have it turned on. You don't have to activate it. That's not true. You cannot give user license only in admin center. I need to see what the issue was. You can give license from Azure and you can give license from admin center. Yes. Just in time access, like I explained, just in time is just when I need it, I am going to. So when you enable just in time for a particular role, you're saying this role is only supposed to be used when people need it. And so if people don't need it, it will deactivate and then they will not be able to use it. Mean while creating user. Again, um, it depends. So remember what I explained. Somebody is asking, why is it if when I'm creating a user, I cannot assign the user a license when I am using Entra ID, but when I am using admin center, I can assign the license. Remember where I told you that Azure is for the whole, Entra ID is for the whole platform. So there are some configuration that will not go step by step by step there. But M365 is admin center for that service. So if you want to give a license for Exchange or a license for Power Apps, which is on the M365, it only makes sense that when you're creating the user to show you the license. But on the Entra side, it doesn't know if that license is a need. You can create a user on Azure without license. So it's not a user experience biggie if you can't add the license when creating user, because ideally you can create a user without license, because that's where the concept of license group comes in. Remember when I've told you that in an ideal world, very rare will you find yourself adding users to license one by one. Ideally, you should design your licenses around license groups, and then they use dynamic group, because nobody, it is one of the most mundane and very, very simple time waster tax. Nobody's going to allow their staff that they are paying sit down to be creating user and adding license manually. But but when you come for trainings like this, you need to experience it. So you don't have that set. It used to be there before, but now it's not there. So you create your user, and then if your user so if you're creating from Entra, it doesn't give you to add the license, because the default behavior of Entra is that your user might not need a license. It might be a user that needs to work on an Azure, right? It might be a bot account, right? So telling you to put license when you're creating it is not a biggie. But when you finish creating it, right, if that account requires a license, two things are involved. It should match a dynamic attribute that automatically gives it a license, or you go to licensing and now add it. But on admin.microsoft.com, you are specifically working on the admin portal that is for services that must use license. All right. I hope I've answered you, Joykwe. So moving on, yeah. Adeswa says, can we schedule when a permission becomes active? Yes. So you can say this permission should be active from so time to so time. Yes. So that's where you have duration, right? So under duration, so where you see um, um, time bound. So if you see the place, I'm sorry, this is so small. I didn't pay attention. It was really this small. Time bound eligible. So you duration. So time bound. You can say this access is only given between this period to this period. This person cannot log in after this period. I know we used to have some consultants then, right, that we used to do, that we used to tell that they used to work, and then there was curiosity of, when work for home came, that would these consultants be in their home and they're working on core banking. So once it's Friday, that access to that portal is taken away and only comes back on Monday. So yes, you can do time-bound access. All right, moving on. We're almost done with PIM and we'll look at practical. I think we're keeping to time. Yeah, we still have a couple of. So again, when you are signing the, I'll use PIM because it's short and easier than privilege. So I hope you guys are now familiar with the word PIM. So when you want to assign a PIM configuration to an account, right? You can assign it either by, so we just looked at the terminology. So now we're going into how the interfaces, right? You can assign it by going to assignments, and then you assign either it's eligible, right? Or it's active, right? So you can say eligible, and then you now come and say how long is eligible for, or you can say this automatically becomes active. So remember again, I can be eligible but not active, eligible and only active when I do just in time, or I can be configured to be active immediately, meaning that that role is automatically active on my account and still be bounded by time, or I can be active but only use it in a time-bound manner. Again, you can activate role for a particular user or a particular service by going to role, adding what that service is or adding that user. And then you too, you can come and say, okay, I'm eligible for, in this instance, this example is storage blob reader, right? But it is a role that says that I need to activate it. So that means they did not make it active for me. I'm eligible to it, but they didn't make it active. So I will have to come to my enterprise privilege identity when I log in, and I will now click on roles. I will see that role and I will see a button that says active, and I will activate it. Now, if the organization went further to put workflow, then maybe we'll go to somebody for approval. But if there's no workflow, then that means it was configured to be permanent. So speaking on workflow, right? Some roles have been configured that, oh no, I gave you an example of the interns I'm training who I wanted them to really, really enjoy their internship. They've done 2 months, they've done training. I was like, okay, I know you're sitting hearing me. I want you to get the experience of configuring, but I know that we're careful so that you not impact the environment. So what can we do? Put a workflow. So by the time you're going and saying, kindly grant me access to do this thing, the expectation is that you're writing what you are doing. So you could say, I want to configure the SSO app for Canvas, right? And then if I'm not comfortable, I can go and look at the mail trail and see if, or your delivery workbook, and see if everything is there that gives me comfort to say, okay, if I turn this on, you know what you're doing, because I'm aware that we're configuring Canva. I can see we have all our requirements, and the process is straightforward. So I feel comfortable and I'll approve it. So approval is used in some instances. Now, any questions, and I will switch to my tenants. Privilege identity management is very, very is a skill in demand, because if you look at the NIST framework and look at the DORA framework and look at the ISO 27001, they have requirements on how you handle privilege identity. So when you know how to do this, and by the time you're done with your assignments and your tests and you post it in whatever portfolio you're using, and you tweet about it and you post about it. It gives you visibility that you understand how to do this stuff. It's a job description skill that is in demand. I want to put this here. Yeah. Many of you were just all over the place and you forgot that you first of all need to do your design before jumping in. And some people couldn't interpret what's the nomenclature, what naming convention do I want to use for a temporary staff, what naming convention do I want to use for a full staff, for a offshore staff, and all of that. So key points. Every time you need to create, you give it an assignment, step back and do the paper design and understand this. So in that question, right, this question says that we need to add a user. So the question is this user existing? Do we have a privilege account? So if we don't have, then we need to create a privilege account. And if we need to create a privilege account, then these are the questions that should come to your head as an analyst. You will say a privilege account should not have an email. Yes. Privilege account should never have email. A privilege account should never have email, because any account that has email is already exposed to risk, like Kanyaga said. Yes. And the risk you're exposed to is the risk of phishing. So in order to avoid the risk of phishing, right, through phishing emails, do not create your admin accounts with email. And do you know what makes your your account have email? When you create an account on Microsoft platform, what just creating the account doesn't necessarily give the account email. What gives that account email? Who knows? But now we're learning Microsoft, so and you're an IAM engineer, so you should understand this thing. If I create an account, it doesn't mean that it has email, even though it is at blah blah blah.com. It doesn't mean that it has email. What makes an account created in Microsoft's platform have email? Guys, we're now doing practical and people have gone quiet though. No, now what do you mean by access? Access, no, 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 no. Victor, okay, thank you very much. When you assign a Microsoft Office 365 license, then inside that license is a mailbox. Once you assign an Office 365 license to an account, so that's why you see us give you the scenarios of license. Now, in our tenants, we don't have lots of luxury of different type of license and all of that. But the point is that we wanted you to experience what it was like when we talk of license, what it means. So these things are not rocket science. They all have adverse effect to security. So the moment a admin account gets assigned Office 365 license, that account automatically gets a mailbox, and that automatically makes that account mail enabled. Is it okay now? Is it making sense? So that's why we always say you have your design for your license groups, and in your privilege account, you have your design where privilege accounts will match a separate type of license. So they need a license for a separate type of license, and you will see that that's why your license group will have a unique attribute that does not match the nomenclature of an admin account. So that's why before going to configure, you can see that I'm not yet configuring anything. I'm just trying to interpret what this organization wants just by this simple question that they put here saying you need to add a user. It's not just jumping and going to add, which is what many of you want to do in the assignments and you submit to me. You just want to go click, 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 then you say successful. But in real life, that's not necessarily what your boss, you are going to have to add. But when your boss is engaging you, the conversations that will be happening is that, oh, the guys in application development are saying that they want privileged accounts because they want to consume this XYZ, SaaS apps, and they want to do ABCD. And so what do you think? That's what they're going. And at the end of the day, the conclusion will be go and create this XYZ type of group. So you need to understand how did they arrive there, and maybe they would have even missed something. And you say, boss, I think we missed something. Though. If we do it like this, are you aware that we have this license group? How do we make sure that they don't match that license group? And then your boss will say, oh, the attribute, remember, because it's an admin account, we're going to give it this unique attribute. And we're going to go back to the licensing group and we're going to say exclude any use account that has this attribute. So they will never go into the licensing group for Office 365, but they will go into the licensing group for P2 license because they need license as an admin account. This is the design that you need to do before you rush to go and add user. But if it is to add user, I can show you in 1 minute and we are done and you'll be happy. And when I give you an assignment, that's not what I will give you, because joy, with my years of experience as solution architect, know that what stands you out in the interview is not because you added user, it's the design and architecture that you do. And so I want you, remember, I said this year is not cho. This year we're giving you real life scenarios like you were on a job and you had to deliver so that you come out top notch. So I'm going to repeat again and pull up my notepad. So when we want to create a user, a privileged user account should not have an email. And how do we ensure that this account doesn't have an email? We make sure that this account does not get added into the licensing group that gives Office 365 license. So in your organization, if you have a licensing group, now that's not the case in this our tenant, right? But you need to conceptualize this thing. So if you had a licensing group for Office 365 and that licensing group, for example, in the attribute, so you see why I wanted you to create dynamic group, because I wanted you to get familiar with attributes, right? I came across somebody's own where the person just used dash user department, and I told her that that was great because it just showed me she has an understanding, and I thought and I explained to her how she could take it a niche further, but at least she understood what unique attributes she could use to create a dynamic group. So you will go to the dynamic group and you will want to read what did they use. If all they used there was if account equals enabled, that is what they are just using in their dynamic group. It should go into this licensing group, and that licensing group has Office 365 turned on. What it means is that any account that's created on your tenant will go into that group. That's not a good design, because it means your bot accounts, everything will be having mailbox, and not all accounts need mailbox. Then at that point, what can you do? You can now come, if that's it, account enabled, you can now come and say and exclude dash whatever. So you do dash exclude and put dash exclude if, for example, if maybe extension attribute 15 has privilege. So whatever is that unique identifier on your privilege account, or dash exclude if user principal name starts with ADM. There has to be something. So that takes us to the next thing, which is a privileged user account should have a unique identifier, because for you to exclude this guy from any licensing licensing attribute or dynamic licensing attribute, you need to have something unique that condition will be added in that attribute. So a privileged user account should have a unique identifier. It can be anything. It can be that when you're creating it, you add a suffix to the name. It can be that you go and take an extension attribute 15 and then you put in a value. Maybe you create your own value. The value could be maybe PRO, SVRO. And so every privilege account, when you're creating it, you would have that value. So if you are doing bulk creation and you are using Excel, it means that in one row, there'll be extension attribute 15 there, and you put the value PRO, SVRO for it, meaning that every account I create, you have it, and then you will go back to the licensing group and make that exclusion. But that brings you to the second one. Now, again, because it's a privileged user account, the privileged user account requires a P2 license, right? Now, many organizations fall short of this, and it's okay. Microsoft will not really beat you if they come to your environment and see that you have 10 privileged users and you did not explicitly add a P2. But guess what? They will go to your license and they will say, you have 10 privileged users. Do you have 10 licenses in your licenses? If you say yes, then they leave you, because it means that because it can still work without directly adding it, but from a compliance perspective, from a licensing perspective, Microsoft expects you. Now, for those of you who don't know, Microsoft and so many third-party vendors in their SLA that you have signed, their SLA states clearly that every year they have the right to come to your organization to audit you to be sure that you are using licensed version of their solution. So if you work in an organization today that uses crack Microsoft softwares, you might be one of those that are getting away. Maybe Microsoft feels your company is not making enough for them to invest their time. But trust me, they go for the big guys all the year, because when they do their throughput, they're able to find some good substantial gap and make good money off them. But just know that your organization is doing something illegal, and that Microsoft has the right, because it's stated clearly in their legal statement on their website, that they have the right to walk into any company that is using their technology and audit you for compliance. So if you know any organization that is using it, they can enjoy while it lasts. But if they grow and begin to grow to a certain length, may they know that Microsoft has the legal right to come. And it's not only Microsoft, lots of the third party solutions that work with a license base. So imagine working for a bank, right? They don't want to pay those kind of huge funds. So by experience, we know this. So when you are sitting as a boss in a space around identity, even if you don't directly add license to the privilege accounts, you want to make sure that the total number of P2 license I have equals the total number of license. And that brings us to why in the assignment I said create a dynamic group, because even if you're not assigning license, you want to still create a group that can give you visibility into the total number of admin users you have. You don't want to go and start counting users. You want to say, if your boss calls you, Dorcas, I need a report on the total number of privileged users that we have. You automatically know that you have a group that you created, dynamic group that you created with an extension attribute or whatever value. And that group, what you just do is go there and say, sir, we have 50 users. And the man's going to look at the license and say, oh my God, we paid for only 30 this year. And we're due for what we call, Microsoft calls it the true up, right? What do we do? Microsoft gives you 90 days to clean up. Microsoft says, no problem, you can use it. But if I come and that license has been active in 90 days, you will pay me whatever amount I find out. I'm talking about small money. I've worked in organizations where people are paying over $200,000, $300,000 and euro to Microsoft for true up. People's head are on the chopping block for that. So it's like I said, there are people who their skill is licensing and they are making good deal just by understanding licensing and how to structure it. So as an IAM engineer or analyst or architect, you want to make sure that your design is proof of this potential flaw that can expose an organization to compliance issues. Um, and that's why I wrote that sitting on top of this is the dependency that a P2 license group should be created to capture. So having said all of this, right, what do you think is the first thing we should do before doing here that says add a role to a user directly? What's the first thing we should do? Who wants to answer? Sorry, good. I'm trying to find my tab. Okay. Somebody said, what is true up? True up is when Microsoft comes to your organization to calculate the total number of licenses that you bought versus the license that you are using. And if they see any differential, you will pay them for it. So that's what is called true up. I like your question, Adenike. But if no mail, how will the privilege communicate others in the organization? You don't use your privilege account to communicate to others. Don't you get it? Your privilege account is not your normal account. Your privilege account has no business talking to anybody in the organization. Your privilege account is specific to the task that it was created for. If I am a security administrator, and as a security administrator, I'm supposed to configure MFA, conditional access policy, why do I want to use that account to chat with you, Nike, and say, hi, hello, how was your weekend? Are you joining the meeting? No. Are you seeing it? Can't you get it? It's not adding up. That account was created to do what? For me to be able to configure MFA conditional upon. Why do I need that account enabled to just email you to receive? HR says that today is public holiday, everybody. Hey, Why? No, that account has no business knowing that. So as an admin, you will have your normal user account that you can use to attend to your emails, and you will have your admin account that is specific to the admin function you are using. That enables us align with zero trust methodology, which is least privilege, assume bridge, and verify explicitly. I'm happy that I did. Thank you. Any question again before we proceed? Okay. So I hope you guys are not lost because I'm not getting the engagement that I would expect from here. So we want to add a user to a privileged and non-privileged role, and we have established that the user's account should not have an email. The user account should have a unique identifier, should have a license. So that brings me to what I call design decisions. You must always, anytime you want to implement something as an IAM person, you must have what we call design decisions. You can see I took it in this note. Now, in my real world, right, based on my experience and level, it will not be this shabby. But I intentionally just scribble things here for you to understand that this is how you do it at your entry level. Just scribble your thoughts. So you must have your design decisions. Now you have read, remember the key points I gave. Now you've come to design decisions. And what's one of them? Provisioning a user account, right, is not is a foundational control that allows you or requires you to enforce least privilege within your structure, right? So the first thing you want to do is have a naming convention standard. You don't just jump and create accounts because they say create accounts. If not, your organization will be a mess. That means when a hacker comes, you cannot know that a hacker is because you have just created random accounts. Again, in cybersecurity, you want to be able to identify who is doing what. So what do? You have a naming convention so that anything outside this naming convention triggers and throws up that something is wrong and that this is an anomaly in the organization. So for a privileged account, right, we want to create an account that I have decided to use a naming convention called ADM underscore first name, first letter of last name, and not with a custom domain, but the suffix. So I forgot to put this up. I should have put this as a key point, this one. Never create an admin account with a custom domain. So remember when I said that what's one of the things that will make your account have an email? We said Office 365 license. The second one is a custom domain. You know what a custom domain is? A custom domain is the one that is unique to you. So Microsoft will give you this one called on Microsoft. The custom domain will be your oringo.com, will be your wesite.com, training.online. That's your custom domain, right? Now, when you add your custom domain to your tenant, when you are creating an account, it will want to take your custom domain if it is set as the primary. Do not say it, switch it into to set this one. Again, when I'm going to create my user, I will show you guys. I need to, like, again, I need you guys to leave creation and understand design because that's the main thing. So never create your admin account with a custom domain because that's the second reason why your account will have an email, because custom domains are configured to receive emails based on that they become your MX, right? Yep. So you don't want that, but you should have the suffix dot on Microsoft or whatever. So in this instance, this is mine. So remember, I said this is my naming convention, right? ADM underscore first name, first letter. So normally your naming convention is something that an organization would have. So if you're working for a big organization, they already have this. So if you come into an organization, you should ask, maybe if they route a ticket to you and say, Nike, create this, you should say, oh, can I see the naming convention standard? Because every organization have it. But if you're working for small companies or you have not worked for anybody yet and you want to use your experience here to go and start targeting, small companies to get them on board, these are the kind of documentations you would do that will make them know you know your stuff. You prepare naming convention standards for them, you prepare, user provisioning templates and all of that. Yeah. So in this my naming convention standard, which typically should go through an IAM architect for sign off, right? People who work with me and other me will give me this kind of documentations and will review and will sign it off, or we'll give it to the clients who we're working with, and they will deliberate if they want it like this, right? So this is now the one I want to use. So my name is Joy Emedom. So I'm going to use Joy E ADM underscore, and this is my tenant, right? And so for your case, you would replace this when I give you assignment with whatever your tenant and whatever naming standard. Now, I came here to give an example of what a typical naming standard would look at, right? You can say first name dot last name, which is what you will use typically for employees, most organizations. You can say first name dot first letter of last name. You can say first name or first letter of last name. So this one is dot, this one there's no dot. So you can see the examples here. So your naming convention would have what the convention is. So of course it's not going to have all this one. Your naming convention should be one. So you have a naming convention for, you have a naming convention per identity type. So employee will have a naming convention. Privileged users will have a naming convention. Contractors will have a naming convention, like that. It's not that you have this one, two, three, four, five type of naming convention for employee. No, that's why it's called naming convention. So we're going to say our naming convention for employees, full-time employee, we can pick any of these naming convention and put. Then our naming convention for privilege account, we can pick one of these, and that's it. Not that one can have five. I hope that's clear. I'll look at the chat to see if there are questions. So you can see the naming convention again that I put here that I took, that's an example. So now we have our naming convention, right? Now I can go and create my user. So but before I go, remember we talked about that the account should have a unique identifier, right? So I also want to define that. But before I define that, right, I would create what I call a user provisioning template. Again, ideally, because there are so many things, there's for me to achieve my naming convention, I need to know the first name, the last name, the middle name. I need to know the department and maybe some other things, right? Instead of just being all over the place, I need to have something so that I can use it to complete my design. I always recommend to people to have what we call a user provisioning template defined. So that's something that was missing for a lot of you in the assignment. You just jumped in downloading the CSV and struggling. Some of you putting so many things there that made you confused. You should have asked yourself as an organization, what is our user provisioning template? You don't necessarily need to fill everything that Microsoft puts there. So you pick out what is key. So I would have expected you to read the assignment and see the key things there that we talked about and use that to build your user provisioning template. So in this instance, if you look at the key points I've talked here, just focus on what is relevant. In a typical environment, I might take additional things here. So I need first name, I need last name, because remember, my naming convention is factoring that. I need the department just so that I can know the license, because somewhere in the assignment there is somewhere in the demo there is I should create a group and I probably might want to use department. I don't know yet. A unique attribute for privilege account. So I want an attribute called PRV underscore USR, and I'm going to put this in my attribute extension attribute 15. Then I want the employee ID, because I want to, now I'll tell you why. So for every value that I ask, sorry, for every attribute that I put here, you can even come and define why you want it here. Some people in their user provisioning template will define it. So for example, the reason why I chose employee ID is that, remember, there's no email on this account, but I want to still be able to match who owns this identity with what from a audit perspective, right? So it doesn't have an email, but if I export this report, I want to see that whoever is ADM Jacinta E is an employee that has this ID, because everybody has an employee ID, even if they're going to be privileged users. So that's the thought process I had when I created my own user provisioning template. I'm going to come back to the chat just to see if anybody has any question before I go. Okay. Um, okay. Eruf Young, I don't know. I know some of you are very scientific, right? But I'm not talking of throughput. I said true up. I throw up. I didn't say throughput. Yeah. Adeswa says, is it normal to use one naming convention for the whole organization for consistency per identity type? Per identity type. So you can say first name dot last name for employees, but you can't still use, if you use first name dot last name for the employee, and you want to use first name dot last name for admin. Someone should tell me, will it work? It can't work now. It will tell you that that name already exists. Remember, Joy Emedom, who is an employee, is also an admin. So you can't have first name dot last name for employee and say first name dot last name without any additional thing for admin account. That account will not even create, because it's going to tell you you have this account existing in the system. So if I understood your question correct, if you're talking about consistency, if you're talking about maybe the sequence saying first name dot last name, can I use first name dot last name as a pattern? As a pattern, yes. So you can use it as a pattern, but it doesn't mean that it has to be first name for last name for privilege account and all of that. So if you get what I'm saying, so it can be a pattern. You can say employee first name dot last name, admin account first name dot last name with a suffix ADM, contractor account first name dot last name with a suffix um, um, CONT, right? So are you getting it? So that's now the consistency. So yes, you can now develop your naming convention with that kind of consistency rather than be all over the places. But it's not like you say first name or last name for all type. What differentiates a contractor from an admin account from a user, if you get what I mean? So yeah. You answered the question good. Say, as one person, can one person belong to two groups? Yes, yes, yes. We remember when we talked about you can be doing this and do that. When we go into groups, you will see that yes, you can belong to multiple groups depending on the roles that you're doing. So let's speed up a bit. It's already 3 o'clock. So we're going back to the tenants. Just for refresher, this is what we are creating. So now we've agreed. So now we have our user provisioning template. So when you were doing your assignment, if you had done your design first, this is what you would have had: a user provisioning template with all the accounts you wanted, with the departments, with whatever unique identifier you were going to use to create your groups. Even in some instance, you add here and add, groups. In some instance, when you're creating, so this is user provisioning template, right? When I move to, there's something called the privilege identity model that would have this and some extras. So it will have groups, it will have roles and all of that, right? So you must define that first before moving on. So let's take this and go and use a GUI to create. So we're creating Jacinta ADM under first name and first letter of surname. So let's move to the tenant. We come to users and we say new user, create user. This should be easy peasy for everybody. Sorry, this is first name, last name. This is not Jacinta Eme. Go back here and take we're just taking the first one, ADM underscore this. Come back here, put this here. Blah 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 blah. Auto generate password. What do I want to be the display name? I can use the same thing here. Doesn't matter. Sorry. Yep. Auto generate password. Let me just use my own default password. Sorry. Okay. Must not be weak. Ah. Sorry guys, let me just write it down so I don't forget. Okay. What else did I put there? I put name, so I've done name, I've done this department, unique attribute, employee ID. So let's go back. Those are what I want. So come to properties. Is there department here? Perfect. We have department here. So let me go and copy. And even if you're going to use your CSV, it's okay. So this is what will be on your CSV. And by the time you give HR this, HR would have populated. You don't have to worry. Employee ID, I created my own fictitious employee ID. So blah blah blah. Employee ID. What else? So I have a unique attribute here. I hope I can find. I would have loved to include location too, but that's when we enter MFA. You see that. Let me see. Can I see unique attribute here? Or maybe after I've created it. I can't find attributes. there's something called extended attributes on. Okay, I can't find it, but let's go ahead. I would find it maybe when we save. All right, so I did not put extended attribute for now. So next. Uh, Great. So I've created my first user, my first admin user, right? That's it there. I create the second one just in case. John. Close your space. Uh-oh. Okay. Properties, first name is John Doe. So this person has a middle name. This person is John Doe Samuel. There's no need for middle name. Samuel. User type member, blah blah blah. Department, person is in what department? App support. What's the employee ID? All right. Boom. Boom. All right. I'll just search with ADM so that it give me every account. Oops. All right. Now remember, we haven't really done our assignment. We just created. So now the first task is add user to a privileged and non-privileged role. Right. So now we have a privileged user. Now it says we should add it to a privilege role. That brings me to what I call the privilege identity model. Sorry. All right. You don't just jump and because which role? So when they say role, what role are you adding? So again, you don't just jump. You want to. So I bring back my provisioning table here and I'll add more fields. So I'll add roles. Right now, the question is who is Jacinta? So you this is where you want to understand this user. Of course, this information would have been provided in the real world example, but if you're reading the assignment, you want to interpret wherever they have put who this user is, if I don't explicitly call it. So this user I'm seeing here is in DevSecOps, right? What's the job role of DevSecOps? What do they do? So ideally, you'll be able to define if you look through the roles and identify what roles. So I'll just pick random roles, right, and put here. But you should have what the roles would be for DevSecOps and what the roles would be here. So let's take it that we're just going to give this user a so come back here. Sorry guys. No. So let's go to Entra ID. These are you following me? Entra ID. And then we come to roles and administrator. Are you seeing it? And then we see all our roles. Can you see? I'm just going to pick anyone. But ideally, before you come here, maybe they would have told you, oh, DevSecOps team is responsible for doing A, B, C, D, blah, blah, blah. You would have researched what the role is. And then on your template, you would have put the roles there so that it's clearly defined that that's the model you use. But here, we would rather pick it and then go and paste it there. Just for that. So we just pick any random role here. Now, this brings me to what I was teaching. Remember what I said? The badge, right? Right? The badge and the non-badge. So for example, see this one, attacker payload, although it's saying it's privileged, but it's not seen as privilege that can take over the world, for lack of a better word. So um, that's what the assignment says. I should put non-privileged and privileged. So I'll just pick random. I'll pick an AI administrator role. So I'm going to add AI administrator role for this person. So what did I do? I'm going to go back so that people can follow me. Please, I'm going to go all the way back so you can follow me. So I want to add a role. I come to Entra. I come to role and administrator by the left. I look for the role. So in this instance, it's the role is that we want to use is AI administrator. I click on it, right? And up here I will see add assignments. So I click add assignment. Are you with me? And it's loading to take its time. It's coming out. And then it has come out, right? You can see this role, right? And I'm going to say select member, and I will look for ADM Jacinta, and I will select, and I'll say next. And then that brings me here to the setting. Are you seeing it? It's now saying, do I want this to be, it should be eligible and permanently eligible, or do I want to say eligible and put a time base? So I think, I don't know if it was Nickel who asked about time based control. Can I start? And so I can say it should start, today is 24th. I can say it should not start today, it should start June 1st. Are you seeing it? And time. Or do I want to switch to active, meaning that this person is, even though eligible, but is active immediately and permanently assigned, or active and again time based? And do I want justification to be enforced? Um, and that's it. I'm not going to say, okay, I'm going to come back to the chat so I can see if you have any questions, or I go back and take the steps. Any questions so far? Is it making sense, please? Am I communicating? This class is quiet today. What happened? Are we exhausted already? Week 3. Week 3, you're already tired. Ah, okay. So let's go back. So let's look at here again. Remember, we said we want to give AI role because the assignment said we should pick a non-privileged and privileged. So AI is non-privileged with that. It doesn't have the privilege badge. And we've put that here for Jacinta. So we go back, and this is Jacinta. Now, remember, in this PIM model, I did not define whether it is eligible, blah, 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 because the expectation is that that has already been defined on the role for the organization. So you define whether it is permanently eligible, whether it is not eligible, and all of that at the role level, not when you are adding the user. You don't, except there's a specific request to modify the default setting. That's when you do it, right? Now, because I have global administrator, I can make certain changes on the go. So I'm going to cancel and then redo it and just leave the default. I'm going to cancel, not because I can't save that, but just so that I leave the default. I'm repeating myself because of those who will watch this on YouTube, just so that they understand that there was no issue with what we did. I just wanted to recreate it again and leave the default setting without switching it away from permanent, so that I can go back to the account and explain. Okay, so when you'll be watching this on YouTube, that's why I canceled. So we're going to come back and just add Jacinta, right, and say select, and then select, and we're going to leave it as eligible, and we're going to say permanently eligible. That's fine. And we're going to assign, and I'll do one more for the other person. So let's go back to roles. Let's look for another role that we can assign that is not, so let me just scroll down, pick randomly. I'll pick office apps administrator. I will click on it. Let me just, and I would say add assignment. So we're adding John now, remember. Add assignment, select member, add the second ADM account, John, and I will select, and I would next, and I will leave it the way it is, and I will assign, and this it. Now I've done the first assignment, which says that add non-privilege. Now the second one says add privilege. So I'm going to look for a privilege account. Let's look for user management that the both of all of you have. User management is you. Yeah, so you can see user management is a privilege. So I'll click on this and I'll use user management for the two of them. I won't stress us doing it twice. So if I wanted to add the both of them user management, I would just search ADM, and when the both of them come, I'll just check the two of them. I'm not changing here intentionally. You can change it if you want, but the assignment doesn't ask me to change it, so no need of modifying it. So that's it. So if we come here, it says create, add a user to a privileged and non-privileged Entra role. That is just what we have done. We've come to Entra, again, Entra, roles and administrator. We've identified a privileged and non-privileged role, and we've added the two ADM accounts that we have. Give me a thumbs up if it was very clear and you understand. And then if it was not clear, write in the chat, Joy, I'm still not clear, so that I can see how to help you. Thank you very much. Okay, let's progress to the second question. I'm looking at the chat and I would like to see. All right, the second one says, add Entra role to a group. Add Entra role to a group. Right now, it means that this group is specific to Kiniko, to a privilege role, right? So I'm going to come here and go to home, go to groups, and create my group. Remember, we don't need M365 group because this is a privilege account. We're not going to work with Teams. We're not working with SharePoint. We're not working with Exchange. So never select an M365 group for a privilege account. You're not using all of that for it, right? Group name, again, naming convention. So somewhere here in your naming convention document, right? When you did naming convention, you should have come here and say naming convention standard for administrator account, which you can even have for user employee account, and then you also come here and say for groups. Are you seeing it? And then you will define what your naming convention for groups is. So different organizations, different. Now some organizations would use suffix like LIC, would mean license, would be is starting with license. Some would say CRG, which is your CGR, which is security group. Some will come DIS, which is distribution group. Are you seeing it now? So again, depending on what the organization wants. So since we want to just create a security group, it could be security group. And then do we want it a group that is for all of them or particular to a department? So I'm trying to create a group for a particular role, because if I have one group that all of them are inside, then it has to be a dynamic group, because it means that what is unique across all of them is the license. But that's not what I'm creating. I'm trying to create a role, right? So I'm going to do per department. So it will be security department. Some people would like to call it this RBAC. I like to do this. Remember where I told you that there's the privilege and non-privilege. Again, because of the NIST framework is very clear on how granular this thing should be, we recommend that you separate your groups, have a role-based access group and have a PAS access group. So for example, this would mean, so the example of this would mean SGRU, RBAC, and then what's the department of one of these guys? DevSecOps. That's an example of a group naming. So this is the naming convention of. So what we're saying here is that if you want to create a security group that you are going to assign a role-based access control, right? Then name it as SGR role-based access control dash the department. And this one is a security group, sorry, not SC, a security group that you're going to assign a privilege-based access control and the department. So here, an example would be, again, oh, I'm changing, sorry. SGR-PBAC dash it can still be DevSecOps. And then licensing group will come back to. So this will now be the legend that is explaining what these short guys are. So this will now say, this will say Aruba is role-based access control for non-privileged labeled roles, and this will be PBAC, privilege based access control for privilege labeled roles. So this documentation is your design document. It has to be very clear so that anybody that comes, when even the auditors come, you say, how did you arrive at this? So this is the naming convention. Like I said, it will get signed off by an architect and then use it for implementation. So now we've come back to, I now know the groups that I want to create, right? So I don't have a group for the other department, so I'm just going to copy this sequence and use it in my table here. So here's group. I'm just trying to manage my space. And then I'll just have another one here called app support. Okay. And then I'll have the second one here called B. And I'll have the second one here called B. I'm going to come back to the chat so that I can see if there's any questions. Eru says not clear. Eru, is it around the group, right? So let me go back again and take it. You say it's not clear, right? All right, so let's go back. Eru, please, thumbs up if you're referring to the group or if you're referring to the users so that I know. Okay, so here we have add Entra role to a group, right? So this task will require us to create a security group because I don't have any group for my privileged users. Remember, I just created them now. They're not in any group. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a group, but I'm not just going to jump and create a group. What am I calling the name of the group? Because when I say new group, it's going to ask me for a name. So I need to come back to my design document and define what the standards. So the same way, remember under this section, defining a naming convention, I have defined for the administrator accounts. I need to also define a naming convention for the group. And I'm giving you a typical example of the kind of naming conventions you have. We like to use this kind of legend because it automatically tells somebody when you see LIC, you know it's a licensing group. When you see SGR, you know it's a security group. When you see DIS, you know it's a distribution group. When you see RBA, you know it's a role-based access control for non-privileged labeled roles. And when you see, let me reduce this guy a bit. Yeah, so it will go up. And when you see PABC is privilege based access control for privilege labeled roles. This should be clear by now, right? This is pretty straightforward. So this is me defining what my naming convention is for my groups, right? This is the legend. This is it. So now that I've defined it, right, I come back here and I say this is the example. So it will be SGR because what I'm creating is a security group. I'm not creating a licensing group. I'm not creating a distribution group. A distribution group, like I explained to you, is only used to distribute. It doesn't collect permission. A distribution group is I want to email all of you in security class. I don't want to type your email one by one. I put all of you in a group so that whenever I send you email, it will land, but it cannot collect policy. So it's a distribution group. A security group is that I can apply policy to it. A licensing group that is going to be specific for how I allocate license to the users. So this is how you build your design documents, right? Now I've come to say that the naming convention for a security group will be SGR, which is the suffix that I have agreed here. The role, how to identify if it is a role-based access or a privilege-based access, and then the department. So I have come here to give an example. Now I came to my table because remember, this is my users that I'm working with. I now had to create the group that I'm going to create for them. So these are the 4 groups I'm going to create, but I'll just take one here, one here. I'll take the R back here, and I'll take the P back here. And that's it. So now that I've defined it, I'm going to come to my Entra and say, go back here, and go to groups. You can come back to Entra right here, groups, and I'll say new group. You can see that it's asking me what type of group. I've already defined it, remember? So now I know. Not that I'll be confused clicking. Should I create M365? I know that I don't need to create. I've defined it. A security group for privilege accounts, right? What's the group name? I've defined it. So I'll just paste the group name there. You can put any description here. It can be um, service ticket. If you are in an organization, you want probably have a service ticket because you're not supposed to do these things without a service ticket. So 11111, whatever. Now, can you see here what it's asking me? Can you see here, guys? It's asking me that Microsoft Entra role can be assigned to this group, yes or no. And the assignment says add Entra role to a group. So I can create this group and do not turn this on because it's not supposed to be a Microsoft Entra group role. But now the assignment says I should do that, so I must turn this to yes. Are you seeing it? And then it has asked me who is the owner. Always have a group owner because if for any reason, things need to change, it will email the owner. So have a group owner. This typically will be maybe the head of department of the group and all of that, but it's not mandatory here, so won't worry. Now, members, I have to go and who is my member in that my group? Jacinta. So I come here and I look for Jacinta and I add Jacinta. And now it's asking me which role do I want to give this group. So again, I will stick to this role that we have here just because I don't want to complicate it. So, in an ideal world, we shouldn't have added the role directly to the user, but I wanted us to see that you can add a role to your user in case you have that kind of use case, or you can add a role to a group. So we'll add the same role, which is AI administrator, and we'll come here and say this is the role. That's it. Now, how do we verify what we've done? Remember, you come to all groups. Let's look for that group that we created. That's it. So let's click on the group. That's it. Now, by this side, go to managed. Now come to assigned roles. Can you see it here? And you can see it's active because we assigned it the AI role and it was active because we assigned it directly, right? For the role, for the group, sorry. Now, if we go to users and check for Jacinta when we added her directly, now this is going to be a bit conflicting because I'm not supposed to use the same user, but that'll be fine. Assigned roles. Remember when we added, yeah, this was the, and we said it was permanent. We didn't put a start time and an end time. Remember? And we made it eligible. So these were the ones we did when we added user directly. This is the one when we added through a group. So you can see it here, membership group. You can see it here, membership direct. So when we added the role, when we did the first assignment, this one, I said we should add directly. That's how this user got it, membership directly. But when we did the one via role, she got it into her active because we didn't change it, the settings. So that's it. We've answered these two questions. Now it's coming here to say add Entra role to a PIM enabled group. Now, what is a PIM enabled group is the question that you should be asking yourself. A PIM enabled group is a group that we're saying that when you turn this group, when you convert this group, so when you create this group and it becomes a PIM enabled group, it means that the people who are inside that group must always use a privileged identity. They must always ask for activation just in time. They're not just going to have direct access. A PIM enabled group means that that group must request just in time before the users will get access. Did you see that when we created, let me go back here, when we created this group now, right, group, you see that it went straight to active and the button here to activate is not there for the user because it's already active. Are you seeing it? Let me do something here. Yeah. But when you create a PIM enabled group, it's going to force the user to activate that group, that role, sorry. So I'm going to try something here. I'm going to create a totally different new user and add a user to a PIM enabled group so that you will see the experience, because this user is already direct as assigned, and so might not be the best example. Or I remove, let's create one more user. So let's create ADM. Sorry, I'm just using any name that came to my head. Dokas, your name came to my head. All right. So we have a third user that we have not used, and then it now says we should create a PIM enabled group. So let's go back to Entra, go back to groups, and new group. We want to create a PIM enabled group. It's a security group. It's a pack, because as long as it's PIM enabled, then it's a privilege identity. Role-based access group don't necessarily need PIM. So privilege identity, and what department was that? Engineering. Yep. The owner. Uh, sorry. Should I add it here? Do I add it here? I'm not going to add it here because I'm not yet sure if I should add it here or after I make the group enabled. But you have to turn it on for Entra, yes, and then I'm going to say yes, yes. And then I'm going to come back to the group. Sorry, I have a space there, engineering. Yep. And then I'm going to come to, okay, I think I'm too fast. I just remembered, so I'll go back again. We understood to the point where I've created the group, right? So let's go back. I've created the group. I want to search for the groups. I just realized that was too fast. Group. I want to search for the group that we just created. This is the group we just created, right? And now I want to make it PIM enabled because the assignment says user to a PIM enabled group. So add Entra role, sorry, to a PIM enabled group. Also, I should have added it then. That's fine. And then add a user to a PIM enabled group. So that's fine. So we'll do the two together. So this is the group. I want to make it PIM enabled. So when I come to the group, so instead of coming to assigned role where you saw that, I will come down here, activity, and I will see privilege identity management. And I will say enable PIM for this group. I'm not going to enable it. I'm going to come to the chat. I want to see if everybody's aligned so that I can start again. Should I repeat the process for enabling PIM enabled group again? If you want me to repeat it, let me just say reaction, or if you understood it, I can just proceed. All right. Okay. So I know that at this stage, we all know how to create group. We've seen it several times. So creating the group was not the issue. We've created the group, right? Good. So now we created the group, right? Now the task says make the group PIM enabled. When you create a group, you go to your Entra, however you want to go, whether you want to go here or you want to go to through groups directly, anyhow, but just choose whatever works for you and then search for that group. right? So I just do SGR because I know we have so many SGR, and I know that the SGR I created was engineering. So this is the group. So you click on the group. Now you go by the left and scroll down, and you will see privilege identity management under activity. You click on it, and then you see enable PIM for this group, and then you click enable PIM. You can see it here. Look at it top. So when you look at up, that thing like looks like a bell for notification. You see it, to tell you that it's doing something. So that in case some of you don't panic now, when I give you a sign, say, I've been clicking on the thing, it's not working, it's not doing anything. I'm just frustrated, I'm having headache, I've not eaten, I've not slept. It will be there moving. So you can see it successfully onboarded. This group is now a PIM enabled group. Now I need to add a role to this group. So I would come here. So you can see that the add assignment is here. And I will add, let me add, sorry, this is owner. That's not what I want. Sorry. I will add member first because the assignment says I should add a user. I will add this new user that I created, which was Dockers, right? Yep. I've added Dockers. And then I need to add a role. Search role. She's a member. She's not the owner. And then if you come to setting, it will tell you. So this is where you can see is eligible. It's not active because a PIM enabled group will just be eligible. It will not be active because you need to PIM it. Again, if your organization wants to make it active, they should. But the ideal concept of a PIM enabled group is that you want people in that group to always PIM, to always request for token before they log in. So you don't want to switch it to active, except where it's been explicitly said that you should switch it away from eligible to active. Right. So next, unassign. So I've assigned this user, but this group doesn't have a role. Right. Remember, the group doesn't have a role. So we go back to groups. This is the group. And then I come to assign role, right? And I assign it a role. So let me look for a privilege role. Now you you don't need to cram this list of roles. Microsoft has documentation. You can always look at it and know which one is privileged, which one is not privileged. And that's it. And I will say next. Permanently eligible. Yes, yes, yes. Next. Now let's go and search for this user. Dockers, sorry. Dockers will be on the users. An assigned role, and you can see it will not be active because we didn't give her an active. We gave her a PIM enabled role that was, sorry, it's shit. What's happening? Sorry. I can't find. Sorry, guys. It's not even saying hi in my group. What happened? Sorry, I need to trace what happened. Something is not right. Is she? Uh, engineering. Yep, members. I thought we added this chick. Guys, I mean, I didn't save. That's strange. I thought we added her now. I want to see your reaction in the chat. I thought we added her. Oh my god. This looks like the more you look, the less you see. Serious, I thought we added her. Just give me 5 minutes, I'm almost done. Okay, let me just add again. Wow, that's strange. I thought we added her. It's not remember. Okay, so let me go back to users. Dockers. Assign role. Okay. Uh, assign group. Okay, okay. I need to find out why it's not showing in assign. Maybe because it's not directly assigned to her. I can't remember if that's why. But at least I can see the group, and the group has the assigned role. Yep. Okay. So that's it. I would take that away. Why? If you add a user to a PIM enabled group, it won't show as assigned because you didn't really assign the role to the user. You assigned it to the group. So that could be it. Um, and that's it. So that's how we've answered the second one. Now we have create a custom role, set up PIM in Entra, and customize Entra role settings left. But I'm going to come back. I'm going to jump here to say, is there any question?
So my question is, since we can just create a group and add roles to it, why will anyone want to create user and add role individually to user? Is there any advantage to that?
It's not best practice because it gives you user overhead when you're assigning roles to users directly, right? Especially when you're looking at your joiner mover leavers process. When I leave a department to another department, it means that you have to remember to go and remove my role. But if you add it to group, the moment I leave one team, automatically I leave that group. So I would lose that role access. So for me, best practice, security best practice, we don't recommend adding roles directly to user. But is it possible? Yes, maybe if there's a unique use case, if there's a particular use case that that particular business wants, right? They can come and say, no, for these users, add it directly. They're only going to work. So you can now, in that instance, use the um, duration. Are you seeing it? So maybe they can come and say, these people are working on a specific project for senior executives, right? We don't want to put them in a group, just give them direct access. So you want to use the time, the duration there to say they will have this access from so time to so automatically to disappear. You don't have to come back or remember to go and edit it. Best practice is to always group people. No one person is ideally in a proper company that has sense. Not one person does a job alone. There must be at least two people doing the same job. If you get what I mean. So
Yes, yes.
yeah, so it's best to use a group so that when anybody leaves that department or leaves that team or leaves that job function, the moment they are taken out of that group, they lose all the access. So we're just learning it, but it's not the ideal way to give roles to users directly. No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. So one of your projects, I will give an assignment, simple assignment like what I did now, but one of your projects is going to be on privilege identity management, a real life scenario that I worked on a client's project, right? But of course, fictitious names will be given on privilege identity management. And I'll be expecting, like I said, your design document, your naming convention standard, your thought process around the roles that you're giving. So I will not tell you the roles to give because I will expect you to go and study. As an identity analyst, you need to go and read roles. I will give you what the job functions are, and you will choose the role that is applicable to that person based on what has been described, because that's how it is in the ideal world. In the ideal world, nobody's going to tell you, give Joy this role. You're going to sit in a conversation and they will say, this team is called service desk. they are responsible for wiping people's devices when it's been stolen, and this other set of people, even though they're in the team, are not responsible for wiping people's devices, but can review the properties so that they can know if the device is compliant and all of that. And the expectation from you at that point would be a team of 5, 2 people will require high level privilege to delete devices. The remaining 3 are not required, but all of them should have the ability to view properties. So what does that tell you? It tells you that you need to find the role that gives ability to manage devices first of all, because all of them are managing devices, and then custom that role and create the one that will allow deletion and give it to the guys for deletion, and the ones that will not allow deletion and give it to them. So that's typically how it would be in real life. So that's how the project is going to be. But for the assignment, I'm just going to give you what I did here, just do a little bit of tweak to it so that you can practice the movements, the familiarity. But your project is going to be a real life example. Just again, like I said, the goal for me is I want all of you at the end of the day to not say you don't have job experience. The experiences I'm giving you is real job experience. So you should be able to convert your projects, edit your CVs, and write textile as so they you executed, you designed and developed a privilege identity model, if that's the project topic you took, or you designed and developed a single sign-on integration for a multi-cloud platform using blah blah blah. You developed your design model, came up with naming convention standards, came up with a HLD, high level design, identified your role based access controls and the conditional access policies and multi factor authentication policies, and you um, were able to roll this out to X number of users. Because if you can work for 2, you can work for 10. And if you can work for 10, you can work for 20.